Welcome viewers, welcome to the third lecture on plasmids. In today's lecture on plasmids, we are going to discuss about the different 6 classes of plasmids. We will be talking about naturally occurring plasmids that are used in genetic engineering, and finally we will talk about artificially synthesized plasmids and their important role played in genetic engineering. So let's start with the plasmids. We know that plasmids usually have got the capability of transferring itself from one cell to another. Such naturally occurring plasmids are called conjugative plasmids. Conjugative plasmids contain gene called tragene that codes for pilus formation, and other surface acting proteins are being synthesized by them. There exists other class of plasmids which are non-self transmissible, and they depend on the conjugative plasmids for their transfer from one cell to other. Such class of plasmids are called mobilizable plasmids. And now we are coming to the 6 broad categories of plasmid classification, which is done on the basis of the different phenotypic traits exhibited by the plasmids. Number 1 comes the cryptic plasmids. Cryptic plasmids are those wherein that confers no identified characteristics or phenotypic properties on the host cell. Such plasmids are called cryptic plasmids, and the example is the 2-micron plasmid present in yeast, and the second example is Morrisville plasmid, a novel retroelement found in the mitochondria of certain Neurospora strains. Next class comprises of the fertility plasmids or F plasmids. F plasmids are conjugative plasmids which contain tragenes. The fertility factor, also known as F factor, is responsible for the transfer of the plasmid from the one cell to the other. Next, we are coming to the third category of plasmids called the resistant plasmids. These plasmids carry and transmit certain antibiotic resistance genes from one bacterium to the other. These plasmids actually provide protection to the bacteria from the human medicines and from antibiotics produced naturally in the soil. It was first discovered after Second World War in Japan, wherein we have seen that Shigella, which is causative agent of dysentery, was showing resistance against certain antibiotics like sulfonamides. Later on, it was found that this resistance or the cause of resistance was a resistance plasmid. So most of the cases, they have a moderate size and they are present in 1 to 2 copies per host cell. And most of them are self-transmissible and they transmit with a low frequency, and they belong to a wide range of incompatibility groups. There are certain threats associated with our plasmids that patients which are severely immuno-compromised or patients after having certain surgery and all these things are at the risk of antibiotic resistant infections. And the second threat is that feeding of the animals with antibiotics lead to spread of this antibiotic resistance gene to the humans who consume those animals. Next, there are certain measures which are taken to overrule this threat, is that use of antibiotics in animals like hen is restricted.
Ma'am, are only our plasmids responsible for the development of antibiotic resistance?
No, our plasmids do play a vital role in developing resistance against antibiotics, but we have also seen development of resistance because of mutations in the chromosomal DNA. But that sort of development of resistance because of chromosomal alteration is supposed to be very much detrimental, is having detrimental side effects. So let's look into or focus into the ways by which the plasmids exhibit antibiotic resistance. So the one easiest method by which the plasmid exhibit resistance is synthesizing certain enzymes that inactivates the antibiotic. And the second mechanism of deciphering resistance against antibiotics is altering the activity or altering the structure of the antibiotic at all, so that it can no longer exhibit its toxic effect. And the third important mechanism of plasmid mediated antibiotic resistance is development of efflux pumps, wherein it uses those pumps to pump out the antibiotic out of the cell. So the cells are completely free of the antibiotic. We will take up different antibiotics and their plasmid mediated development of resistance. So here we can see, number one, we have got a figure which shows that sulfonamide resistance, beta-lactam resistance, tetracycline resistance, chloramphenicol resistance and streptomycin resistance are mostly mediated by the plasmids. So next we take up the beta-lactam antibiotics. Beta-lactam antibiotics are active because of the existence of the beta-lactam ring, which contains an amide group. And what it does, it reacts with the active site of the enzyme which is involved in the building of the bacterial cell wall. So cross-linking of the peptidoglycan is actually prevented by this antibiotic, beta-lactam antibiotics. And the antibiotics of this group are predominantly penicillin and cephalosporin. So here you can see that the cross-linking step is being restricted by the beta-lactam antibiotics. And now comes the question of development of resistance. We will see that plasmids contain a gene that codes for an enzyme called beta-lactamase. What it does, that it breaks this beta-lactam ring, and as the beta-lactam ring is broken, then it cannot exhibit its inhibitory action. And there are ways to overrule this resistance, that nowadays we administer clavulanic acid along with this beta-lactam antibiotics. What it does, that it also has got a similar beta-lactam type of ring, and it binds to the active site of the beta-lactamase enzyme, and it actually occupies this active site and it binds there, and it thus prevents the binding of the beta-lactam antibiotics onto the active site of beta-lactamase. Next we are coming to chloramphenicol. Chloramphenicol, its mode of action is it binds to the 23S rRNA of the large subunit of bacterial ribosome, and what it does, it prevents the peptidyl transferase reaction and thus inhibits protein biosynthesis. And mechanism of resistance, we have seen that chromosomal mutations usually have altered ribosomes that have no longer any affinity for antibiotic. And plasmid bond resistance is that it codes for certain enzymes called chloramphenicol acetyl transferase. What it does, it transfers or adds two acetyl groups onto the chloramphenicol molecule, and addition of these two acetyl groups actually inactivates chloramphenicol. As you can see here, that the two acetyl groups are being transferred onto the chloramphenicol, leading to synthesis of 1,3-diacetyl chloramphenicol, which is inactive. Next we are coming to aminoglycoside family of antibiotics, which comprises of streptomycin, kanamycin, gentamicin, and structure of aminoglycosides consists of sugar rings, at least 3, and which at least contain certain amino groups. And resistance to aminoglycosides arises because of phosphorylation of these OH groups, secondly adenylation of the OH groups, and third acetylation of the NH2 groups. So ATP used as the source of phosphate and AMP groups, whereas acetyl coenzyme A is the acetyl donor here. So modified aminoglycosides no longer inhibit their ribosomal target sites. The aminoglycoside modifying enzyme came originally from the same Streptomyces strain that makes these antibiotics. Tetracycline is a protein synthesis inhibitor. It binds to the 16S rRNA of the small subunit of bacterial ribosome, and our plasmids produces pumps that actually efflux out the antibiotic from the bacterial cell. So TET resistance protein is part of a large family of sugar transporter proteins. So next we are coming to the mode of action of sulfonamides and trimethoprim. Both of them are antagonists of the vitamin folic acid. Sulfonamides are wholly synthetic antibiotics and are analogues of para-aminobenzoic acid, which is a precursor of vitamin folic acid. and they inhibit dihydropteroid synthase, an enzyme which is involved in the synthesis of folic acid. Next we have trimethoprim, which is an analog of pterine ring portion of the tetrahydrofolate, and it inhibits the dihydrofolate reductase. So here what we can see that the resistance against the sulfonamides and trimethoprim develops in such a way that plasmids start encoding certain enzymes which are similar to the chromosomally encoded enzymes dihydropteroid synthase, but the difference lies that the chromosomally encoded dihydropteroids can bind PABA, para-aminobenzoic acid, as well as sulfonamides with equal efficiency, but the plasmid coded enzyme has got no affinity towards sulfonamides. Similar is the case with dihydrofolate reductase. The plasmid coded dihydrofolate reductase has lost its binding affinity towards trimethoprim. It only binds to dihydrofolic acid. Thus, the plasmid coded enzymes are responsible to overrule the resistance against or to overcome the stress created by sulfonamides and trimethoprim. Next category of plasmids that we are going to discuss is bacteriocinogenic plasmids. So there are certain bacteria that are known for their aggressive properties rather than their defensive properties, and their aggressive properties is again being deciphered by the existence of a plasmid that synthesizes certain toxic proteins that kills the bacteria which are the near relatives of that bacteria. So the bacteriocins are generally named after the species or the bacterial species that makes them. Say for example, the bacteriocins which are produced by E.coli are named as Colicins on the basis of the species coli. Then the three best known examples of Col E plasmids are Col E1, E2 and E3. Generally these plasmids have a small size and have 50 copies of these plasmids existing inside the bacterial cells. They are predominantly used in genetic engineering for selection of suitable clones. Next, there are certain mechanisms which are opted by the bacteriocinogenic plasmids to kill the other bacteria. Number one is their effect on the cell wall. Some bacteriocin penetrate the outer surface of the cytoplasmic membrane and the peptidoglycan assembly is ruptured, and as because peptidoglycan it gets disintegrated, the bacterial cell dies up. The Colicin M and Pesticin A112, which is synthesized by Yersinia pestis, kills Yersinia pseudotuberculosis and Yersinia enterocolitica, the plasmid free Y. pestis and many strains of E. coli. Next is the effect of bacteriocins on the cell membrane. Colicin E1 encoded by Col E1 plasmid attack their victims, punctures a hole through the cell wall and plasma membrane, creating a channel, and through this channel an influx of protons and efflux of vital cell components are likely responsible for the lysis of the bacterial cell. As because the protons are getting inside the bacterial cell, the proton motive force is lost, and which is responsible for ATP generation. So this is the way how bacteriocins kills the neighboring cells. Next is their effect on nucleic acids, that nucleic acids are often degraded by the bacteriocins. The plasmid Col E2 and Col E3 encode nucleases. We have seen that Col E2 and E3 proteins show 75% homology in their N-terminal, suggesting that both of them bind the same receptor onto the surface of the host cell, but we have seen that they are quite different in their C-terminus, as because we have seen that their substrates are different, because Col E2 is responsible for destruction of DNA, whereas Col E3 is responsible for destruction of 16S rRNA. So this is how we have seen that there are three different mechanisms opted by the bacteriocinogenic plasmids to kill the other bacteria, either by affecting the cell wall, or by cell membrane or by rupturing the nucleic acids.
Ma'am, how do the bacteria protect themselves from their own bacteriocin?
This is a very interesting question, as because they need to synthesize certain proteins to protect themselves from the toxic effect toxins that they are producing. So we have seen a particular colicin producing bacteria synthesize some specific immunity proteins. They are called antidotes, which are immune to their own product but not to the other brands of the colicins. These immunity proteins, what they do, they bind to the active sites of the corresponding colicin proteins and inactivates them. So this immunity protein has the ability to protect against homologous but not heterologous colicins. Next we are coming to the virulence plasmids. Virulence plasmids are imposing certain characters that help the bacteria to infect higher organisms. So the mechanism of virulence is bacteria having virulence plasmids are capable of attacking animal cells and attaching themselves to the cellular membranes and releasing toxins. These plasmids encode filaments called adhesins and that recognize the cell surface receptors and which are available onto the target cells and attach to them. So after attachment, the bacteria secretes toxins which then infiltrate the target cell and destroys the cell. So this is the main function of a virulence plasmid, as you can see here. Next is there are a broad range of toxins which are available secreted by different pathogenic strains of E.coli. So number one is called heat labile enterotoxin, which is similar to cholera toxin, and second is heat stable enterotoxin, hemolysin, that lyses the blood cells. Another prevalent example of virulent plasmid is tumor-inducing plasmid of Agrobacterium tumefaciens that causes crown gall disease in the wounded plant cells. So we will be focusing more on the TI plasmids, as it is supposed to be the most versatile plasmid which is capable of transferring the gene from bacteria to the plant cell. The story begins with generation of wound in a plant cell. Generation of wound secretes acetosyringone and bacteria is attracted by this particular compound, and it transfers a portion of the TI plasmid that is called as the tDNA, which is responsible for causing tumor onto the plant cells. So the result of crown gall tumor provides a home for the agrobacterium at the expense of the plant cell. So what we can see here, that the tDNA is flanked by 25 base pair inverted repeat sequences, and any DNA included within these repeats will be transferred into the plant cell. Consequently, triplasmids have been widely used in genetic engineering of the plants, wherein any desired gene can be transferred onto the plant cell taking help of agrobacterium mediated tDNA transfer. Next, we will be talking about degradative plasmids. Plasmids with genes of resistance to toxic heavy metals such as mercury, lead and cadmium protect the bacteria from industrial pollution and from natural deposits of toxic mineral. This plasmids provides the gene that allow the bacteria to grow by breaking down various industrial chemicals including herbicides and components of petroleum. Therefore, we may say that degradative plasmids are very much important for bioremediation. Next, we are coming to 2 micron plasmid of yeast, which is a circular molecule of 6318 base pairs of double-stranded DNA, which is present in 50 to 100 copies per haploid genome, and it is located in the nucleus of the yeast cell bound by histones, just like nucleosomes, and it's widely used in genetic engineering, and it contains a perfect repeat of 590 base pairs, separated the plasmid into 2 regions, and the plasmid encoded FLP protein, which is called a flipase, actually catalyzes the recombination between these 2 inverted repeats, and as a result of which 1/2 of the plasmid is inversion of the other relative to other. Plasmids which are used in genetic engineering because it has got certain essential features in it. These features are its autonomously replicating machinery. Number 2, the smaller size of the plasmid is just suitable for them to be used as cloning vehicle. And third, the presence of certain selectable markers. Fourth, the presence of unique restriction endonuclease cleavage or recognition sites. And next is the non-conjugative property or non-mobilizable property should be there to use them as cloning vehicles. And lastly, the replicons should be under relaxed control. So we will be talking about a few naturally occurring plasmids. PSC 101, it was the first naturally occurring plasmid which was used to clone a frog gene inside a bacteria. It was developed by Herbert Boyd and Stanley Cohen in the year 1973, and its name became the first patented commercial DNA cloning vector when SC stands for Stanley Cohen. Next, we are talking about another important plasmid called Colicin E1 plasmid, which is also found in bacteria, and it carries a gene for Colicin E1. It also codes for immunity from this producer with the IM gene existing there. In addition to the plasmid has a series of mob genes. Colicin E1 replication begins at the OIV region. Next, we are talking about artificially constructed plasmid vectors of E.coli. The naturally occurring plasmid vectors were having certain problems. That's why people were eager to make artificially synthesized plasmid cloning vectors, and this during vector designing this point should be taken into account. Number 1, the size of the natural plasmids are reduced and the non-essential and toxin producing parts were deleted, and antibiotic resistance genes are inserted either in vitro methods, using in vitro methods. Multiple cloning sites according to our needs were introduced, and TRA and MOB genes are to be deleted as because we are trying to do genetic modifications. So, we really don't want the spread of this artificially generated plasmids. And the few most important artificially generated plasmids that are used is PBR322. It was created in the year 1977 by Herbert Boyer in the University of California, and it was named after the Mexican postdoctoral fellows Bolivar and Roderick. They were responsible for making this. That's why the name came PBR. Next is PUC series of plasmids. It is derived from because it was being generated in University of California, so UC stands for University of California, and it has 2686 base pairs of DNA. Then it was created by Messing and co-workers, and it is widely used in cloning purposes, and it is good because it is easier in PUC plasmids to differentiate between recombinants and non-recombinants just on the basis of color selection, as because blue-white screening can be done with PUC plasmids. And finally, we are talking about PGEM series of vectors, which are actually expression vectors, which are not only used for the cloning purpose only. Herein we can transcribe the gene, we can get hold of the RNA. So, this is supposed to be the expression vectors which is prevalently or predominantly used by the scientists in genetic engineering. So, in today's lecture, we have discussed about all 6 varieties of plasmids: cryptic plasmids and bacteriocinogenic plasmids, degradative plasmids, conjugative plasmids, virulence plasmids, 2-micron plasmids of yeasts, and we have also highlighted on use of plasmids as cloning vehicles. And finally, we also talked about artificially made plasmids used in cloning purposes.